Hey y'all, hey. It's Morgan Renee. Happy Friday, February 7th, 2020. I just wanted to hop on real quick and share something that I came across. So this morning has been a great morning. I started off early doing some yoga, having some epiphanies and just, good conversations. So I'm just in the space where I'm just open to learning and information. So I connected with a sister on my page. We were talking about health and fitness, and she inboxed me, and she said good morning, and I said grand risings. And I always say that. I say peace, love, and light, grand risings. And so I just wanted to share, because maybe I haven't, why I use these words and why it's important to me. So some years ago, I was put on to people like, I believe her name is Goddess Ayana, and just other people that are so-called conscious or elevated or whatever. I don't really adhere to any of those terms. I'm always self-analyzing and growing, but people that are in that type of, the regular common folk that just go about their day and, talk regular like everybody else versus the people that be trying to sound out extra or however you view it. So anyways, and I just let the sister know that, like, people who are deemed more elevated or conscious or whatever, a lot of us tend to use the words grand risings or, in place of good morning. And I was telling her because I'm also a wordsmith. So when it comes to, like, just the grammatics and etymology is the proper term of the English language, I'm really into stuff like that. And so this particular article I'm about to read, y'all, I was trying to send her because, like, good morning sounds like you have to know how stuff is spelled. Morning, I'm spelling my name, morning, morning, and mourning, like you're sad, with a U in it, mourning. They sound very similar. So I don't want to say good morning because I don't want to put out that energy of death. Same thing with, like, wake. When you wake up, you go to a wake when people have passed on and you see their body before the funeral. When you earn money at a job, you go in an urn when you die and your ashes are put in an urn. So I saw a video some years ago that was breaking down these different words. I can't remember the grammatical term. Is it homonym or something like that, when words sound the same but they're spelled differently? So I just be trying to be on point with not using homonyms so much. So anyways, I was trying to find the video to send her because it was real quick and it broke down like maybe 5 or 10 different words that we use on a consistent basis, and I couldn't find it, but I came across this article, y'all, and I said I need to share this with the people. So it's written by it's called The Slave Code: The Secrets Hidden in the English Language, and it's by Jason Christoph, jchristoph.com, and he's into health, fitness, and wellness, but I'm going to just read it. So it says, Slave Code: The Secrets Hidden in the English Language. Can you see with the eyes you have? The mind is useless if the eyes are blind. And right there, I was like, he ignorant, because people are blind, so... Some people blind, so what you saying? But then I know what he meant in the terms of written language and also, okay, moving along. If the eyes are blind, are you missing anything regarding the words you use on a regular basis? Let's take a look. So work week, spelled the correct way, equals work week, W-E-A-K. Weekend equal weekend, W-E-A-K-E-N-E-D, like your week. So you arrive weakened to your weekend from your work week because the work made you weak. They're called weekdays because they put you in a weekdays, D-A-Z-E. A break is called a break during your slave-filled day because most slaves would break without the break. Our slave masters know this and provide the break because it helps produce more milk from the human cattle. The original break, of course, given to a slave came when they passed out from complete exhaustion or actually died. The slave owner would say he's broke or he's broken or taking a permanent break. How do you pronounce work? Go ahead right now. Pronounce it. That's right. It's pronounced war, and war with a K on the end of it is work. Did you know that K is the Egyptian letter for death? The 11. So work actually means war plus death. If you WAR-K for a living, you know how this feels. The use of a hypno-based language designed by our human farmers helps increase control over the slave class by planting the fertile subconscious with seeds of perpetual servitude. Control is control, controll. The con job designed for the trolls. They send us to their schools and call them schools because just like a school of fish, we think and react as a group. From the doctrine of sameness implanted into us, we're trained as other animals are trained, yet a train is literally a boxcar after boxcar following one in front of it without question or resistance. The word graduation means gradual indoctrination. You get up in the morning, but mourning is a form of sorrow or grieving. You say hello as you arrive, but why is our greeting hell, HELL-LOW, hello? Why is hell a part of our greeting? Why do other words referring to hot places surround us like hotmail or Firefox? Who is the historical hot male? HOTMALE, aka the devil, which is the word lived spelled backwards. Evil being the word live spelled backwards. You get up in the morning, MOURNING. I wish I could read this for yourself so you could see how he's playing between the words, how they sound the same and are spelled different and have different meanings. But just pick up on that, okay? So you get up in the morning, to earn a living, but earn is also earn, a vessel to keep the cremated ashes of your body. Mourning is another word synonymous with death. You wake from your slum, because the system never gives you enough to get ahead in life, with coffee, the same prefix used in the word coffin. Egyptian in origin, originally spelled kafi, Kaffee, or coffin, Kaffin. Ka means the spirit after death. You go to your job, but job in the Bible, which is supposed to be Job, but Job in the Bible has his wealth, health, and children stolen from him by Satan, but Satan was given permission by God to do so. Why is your work, our job, literally named after a man, Job, who has his health, children, and wealth taken away? Why is God and Satan working together on Job in the Bible to make his life more miserable? Why is a meeting place of religion called a parish pronounced exactly the same as perish, a word meaning to die? The word church comes from the word kirk in Scottish. Kirk comes from the Roman word cirque, and cirque comes from the Greek mother Circe, pronounced Circe, a sorceress who would tempt men into her house, turn them into pigs, and eat them. Go ahead, look it up for yourself. That's the best kind of research. For our slavery, we're given $20 bills, $50 bills, $100 bills, etc. But aren't bills something you pay, something you owe? At a restaurant, you're given a bill for $50. Don't you owe $50? And there lies the secret in plain sight. Our payments are called bills by our human farmers because we owe it all back to them. First in taxes and then in useless, meaningless purchases as we waste our money trying to rapidly decorate our jail cell down on the human farm. We spend our bills on soulless purchases from large corporations that our social engineers own. They laugh at how inept we are. This is why most people have no money, because we're not being paid to be slaves. We're being given bills that we need to pay. We're paying to be slaves. That's what debt is. The act of getting paid in bills and having less than nothing as each week, or WEAK, goes by because you owe everything in involuntary and voluntary purchases. The money is charged to leave the slave's hand as soon as they touch it. The system is designed to make the money flow through our hands like water, and by calling the fake paper money bills, a word that means we owe it to others, ends with us being more likely to simply give that money away when we needed to stop being slaves. I know, Rashawn, who did all this? The man. You obey the watch to arrive on time because the watch is designed to be the modern watcher or slave driver. What drives the slave to work when you can't have that many people whipping each slave across the world? That's when the watch comes into the picture, and you can watch yourself, watch your watch the next time you go to work. The watch owns you, rushes you, and you obey it like it has a gun to your head. The watch watches you and signifies the wrist chain worn by someone who isn't in control of their time. You keep looking at your watch as you you race to work, the new watcher is in complete control of the slave, something the slave pays for and wears themselves. The more expensive the watch, the more the slave believes they are free. The necktie. Ooh, I talk about this in one of my poems. You're not a man unless you learn how to tighten and loosen a noose. I mean, wearing a suit and tie ain't really that deep unless you're among the meek sheeps, following the masses who attend college classes to graduate with bachelors just to become masters. But okay, I'm gonna stop right there. So the necktie was originally designed to signify the dog collar or neck chain, meaning being owned and controlled by someone else. You need to have a collar shirt on to wear the necktie around your throat. The necktie means you're tied and controlled by another, a slave to the script. The slave can only pick the color and quality of their tie, but can never choose to be free of the tie around their neck. Like, that's the whole thing. You can't come into work or certain places without the tie. Is not professional. And I've always struggled with it. Like, a lot of stuff that I just feel naturally, I'm like against what the system is teaching. Like, I don't understand a lot of this stuff that we have to do in this world. But like, I've never really, you know how most people, oh, you dress up, that means something, like people are turned on by a man in a suit and tie. I'm not. I prefer a man to not be in a suit and tie. Like, I like men that are like, fuck the system. That's why I be getting caught up in some stuff, because they don't be having no plans outside of fuck the system. But I don't really care for no suit and tie. It don't really impress me. Now, have I seen a brother look clean in one? Yes, because our brothers can look clean in almost anything. But I'm just never really been into the suit and tie, honey. Back to the reading. So the slave can only pick the color and quality of their tie, but can never choose to be free of the tie around their neck. Most people at work have a title. Title is really tie, T-I-E dash tell, T-E-L-L. The symbolism of how your title name tells others who you are tied to. Ooh. Your tie tail signifies who controls the tie or the dog collar around your neck, around the collar shirt like a dog on a leash. People often wear a uniform. Uniform is derived from the word uni, meaning one, and form, meaning a way to be. Uniform means you're programming and conditioned to act like everyone else wearing the same uniform, equaling no independence and no free will. You were schooled like fish to move as one and trained to follow like a train. Now, although he is pointing that out, I don't think that it's always a bad thing, but I do feel like in the context of being enslaved to this system that it can be. But from an African mindset or African cultural perspective, train a child up in the way it should go. Like, there is a benefit in order and decency, because if we're all just free will and moving about when it comes time for war or to defend ourselves or our property or whatever, if we're all scatterbrained and not on the same page, that could be detrimental. So to have people that are in order and can fall in line, even with like dancing or there are different type of defense mechanism where I think capoeira is like a dance fight or something like that. So I do feel like order and being trained can be beneficial, but I can see the demise of it when it's for, being tied to, someone else or a corporation. Like this is clearly stating we're getting paid bills to use those same bills to turn around and pay people and things that we owe for shit that is natural, y'all. Like all this coal and oil and all this stuff, these are natural resources that they are charging us for. Like sunlight, we could get solar panels and be good, but you gotta pay for all of that. Like all of this stuff is natural, and they turn around and make us work for it and then use that same money to get shit that we already need that is already here on this earth. It's ridiculous, man. Oh, I'm so sick of humanhood. It's too much. All right. I already said people all wear, okay. You were schooled like fish to move as one and trained to follow like a train. Your morality and ethics are spoken for. Your time is spoken for. Your thoughts are spoken for. Inject that other slave with a toxic vaccine. Serve that other slave some poisonous coffee at the coffee shop. Go kill slaves in other countries. Inside fake wars where slave master controls both sides. Welcome to the slave life. A uniform means the outsourcing of free will and being reflexively obedient to slave master. Obey, comply, consume, sedate, repeat. To follow, you must fall, F-A-L-L-O, to crawl on your knees the rest of the way. The suit and tie is our most common uniform, signifying our willingness to outsource our morality and ethics to another. Your behavior dictated by forces outside of yourself, the removal of free will. You arrive on time. The word time is TI-ME, or tie me. Tie me to the chain so the work can begin. Put the tie around my neck so I can obey and comply to the I got poor wireless connection. Facebook, don't play. I'm gonna read this to the people now. The cufflinks represent the handcuffs or links of the traditional slave-based chain around the wrist. Yet, if they're made from gold, we think we're free. We lie to ourselves because lying is a word that means we lie down, submitting to our slavery instead of standing up to the slave master. Submit is made up of the word sub, meaning below, and mit, meaning the hand or glove. As we submit, we agree to be under someone else's hand or control. We've exchanged our chains of cast iron for chains of gold. Well, I mean, African people, we like to stun a little bit, so they ain't got to necessarily be what that's about. But I get what you're getting at, Christoph. The person in charge means the person who conducts the electricity, as charge is an electrical or energy term. This describes the energy thrown into us from slave master, making us perform and dance with their electricity as we've had our own personal electrical charge of free will surgically removed by master's indoctrination systems and sleights of mind. The person in charge controls our very electrical life force because we've submitted to their authority. Authority is derived from the word author, the person who writes. Someone wrote down that we are less, and we compile because word magic is powerful. And we comply because word magic is powerful, full of power. The word is more powerful than the sword. But did you notice sword is word with an S on the front of it? How much are you not seeing with the eyes you have? Did you know S is the hieroglyph that represents a person versed in knowledge and word magic? Words are indeed swords if wielded by someone with knowledge of the human mind and spells. That's why writing is called spelling, and fancy writing is called cursive, to cast a spell or curse. S words are used against you every day by what the ancient world referred to as the serpents, the S, the SIR-PENTS, and that is why you call a high-ranking man in our society today sir, as you, a slave, passes by. This is also why we're still under servitude. During conventional slavery, the slave owner had to incur all costs, including housing, health care, food, cleaning of the slave quarters, clothing, birthing of the child slaves, raising the child slaves, transportation of the slaves back and forth from work, celebrations, cleanup after natural disasters, slave entertainment, schooling of the new slave children to be good slaves, etc., etc. A slave owner's profit was always revenue minus expenses, no different than any business. The big trick was to tell the slaves that they were free, let them pay all those expenses, allow them to come back to the plantations, and then to tax them in order to actually make more profit compared to the original slavery concept, with little to no chance of rebellion or resistance. All taxation is meant to increase a slave's dependence on their slavery, as the people taking the tax away from the slaves print the money themselves and therefore don't have any use for it. Taxation is about keeping the slave down. That's it. Taxation has one purpose and one purpose only: to make the slave dependent on coming back to the modern plantations of slavery day in and day out. If the slave starts to save their money, give them a TV full of negative role modeling and watch the slave magically go into debt. If the slave still has money, organize a stock market crash or increases the taxes, theft. The people who print the money have no use for extra fake paper money, which they can print at any time and in any quality they desire. The entire drive of the tax system is to make sure the slave has no extra money, as to provide them with enough freedom to figure any way of this out. Slavery wasn't abolished. The plantation was simply expanded, and they mock us inside the language. Everyone was tricked into becoming a slave while believing they're free. The language is loaded with many disempowering subconscious clues because our human farmers have been at this game much longer than it'll allow us to know. Do you know what's going on? Are you sure? Wow. And even somebody just left a comment. This makes a lot of sense. S-E-N-S-E, not cent, C-E-N-T-S. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That was powerful. I'm about to hop into my book, Recapturing the African Mind. And I may just chop it up and make it 2 separate videos when I upload on YouTube. But yes, y'all. So I know some of y'all think, oh, it ain't that deep. It ain't that serious. Ain't nobody got time to be thinking that deep. It's just words. But the more I learn about this English language and how we're utilizing it, and if you think about everything he said, it has valid points. We go to work. A lot of us, I was on Twitter this morning, and a young lady I know talking about how the place ain't organized and the people who run it and people act like they ain't have jobs. And I got off because I was like, I don't want to read that shit. This is why I don't work at a job. I work for myself, and I cannot handle being an employee at this point in my life. I've been considering, going back, getting some part-time, but it's just not in my spirit because of those same reasons. We go to work, we complain, we don't want to be there, people get on our nerves. The work half the time isn't even fulfilling. It's not a part of our purpose. It's just something to do to make money. And then what do we do with this money? We got to turn around and pay bills. We waste it, or we use it on things that may not even be healthy to us because we want to have a little wine or a little weed or a little manicure or a little this, little that, just so we can feel good outside of this place that we know we got to go to every day that is stressful and just not what we want to be doing with our lives. If we could do what we wanted with our lives, I'm sure a lot of us would just be outside in the sun, traveling, visiting places. But even still, we need people to work so that when we go there, we have flight attendants to assist us. We have somebody to fly the plane. We have somebody that's working the hotel that's going to clean the room, that do all these different things. So it's like we really are communal people. We need each other anyway. It's just the method that we go about doing it and how we, the words that we attach to it are really, 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 really powerful. So that's why I just try to be mindful. Instead of using the word work, I don't know. I'm just moving within my purpose. I'm flowing within my, it's just, and you'll sound weird and people look at you funny because you're not, assimilating to the same verbiage. Like, that bothers me too. Why do we all have to associate the same things with the same language, like with the same words? Like, why can't we have our individual ways of expressing ourselves in that way? But no, we know definite words have definite meanings, and that's what everyone associates to. So I posted that article on my page. It's like one of the last posts I did. So if you want to take a look at that, please do. But that was pretty informative. So I'm gonna hop into my book that I've been reading called Recapturing the African Mind by Bruce Bridges, and he has spoken on quite a few things, about how our mindsets are just toe up from the flow up, back from slavery. And reading that makes me think too, because it seems like it's nothing we can do to get out of this. We gotta pay taxes, we gotta work. We can't just up and stop working and paying bills just because we don't like that this is what this hidden secret language means. Like, I can't just be sitting in the dark with my family because I don't like it, so it's like, what can we really do? But I do understand that at least being informed or knowledgeable of the fact, like, once you have the information, there's no telling what we could do, especially if we link up together. But dang, slavery is really, really strong. All right, so in this book, I am in chapter 5, and it's entitled Early Missionary Explorers and Merchants and Colonial Methods of Control. And so he's talking about how different parts of the world controlled and colonized us. So he was speaking of like British, the way they controlled us was through indirect rule. How the French controlled us was through assimilation. How the Belgian controlled us was through paternalism. So now I'm on the Portuguese control, which was exploitation. So the similarities between the colonial policies of Portugal and Belgium are striking. Grand Risings, Brother Nick. As in the Congo, Catholic missionaries had a favorite status over Protestant missionaries in Angola and Mozambique, since Angola and Mozambique were colonized by Portuguese, most of whom were Catholic. There was a colonial philosophy which embodied the Colonial Act of 1930. Special provisions were made for the activities of Catholic missions in Angola and in Mozambique. The Portuguese Constitution recognized the role of the church, and according to Duffy, you Christianize and educate to nationalize and civilize. And that was another thing that has been spoken on in this book. When all these different places were coming into Africa to conquer us and make us slaves and things like that, they did it through education and through religion, because they're telling us, we need to honor and serve this God to the point that we forgot about whatever spiritual deities or practices we had. And then in education, like earlier in the book, it was talking about how there were nuns that would come in, and the children were forbidden to use their native tongue, and they had a white Jesus up on the wall, and they had to learn what was being taught to them. So it's like you come in to somebody's area and you're trying to civilize them and teach them everything, and they're forgetting about themselves. And you do that for a number of years. You take them across seas, you have them working outside all day and following your orders. No wonder in 2020 a lot of us don't know who the hell we are, and we on here arguing about all kind of senseless stuff when we don't know ourselves. Know thyself is the most important thing. So my viewpoint on like religion, I don't follow any like religious doctrine anymore. I grew up Christian, but now I just see it as, the more I understand me self-analyzing and trying to elevate myself, that's a spiritual practice all of it within itself, and I'm connected to the source every time I do it. How hard is it for you to wake up and stretch and drink water and to meditate and to give thanks, to say affirmations? Like, how consistent are you in that? Like, that stuff really takes practice and time and discipline and just self-accountability. How often do we reflect on, instead of just hopping from relationship to relationship, how often do we reflect on what role we played in it, or how we attracted some of these people into our lives, or what work are we really doing outside of working and spending and just turning up and having a good time? How do we give back to others? How do we, when people are in certain positions, how do we respond to that? So for me, just continuously trying to do the work and elevate and grow is the spiritual process within itself. Trying to unlearn everything that is not for me and relearn how it is that I'm supposed to really be operating in my full self, and even just being your full self. So many people are scared to speak up for themselves, or don't have the confidence to have a voice, that they allow people to run over them or treat them any kind of way, or just whatever. So for me, doing that work is spiritual. Doing that work is how you learn yourself. And it really takes unlearning a lot of what we've been taught, or just didn't know, period. We didn't grow up hearing about it, so we just don't know. So moving on. I think I kind of want to skip ahead, because he's just talking about all these different places and how they colonized us, and that's just kind of self-explanatory. Hold on. I'm going to just read it. All right, so Portugal's colonial policies require harmony between church and state in the colonies. Working together, the church and state succeeded in Christianizing and converting Africans into Portuguese. Nowhere is the relationship between the Vatican and the government more apparent than in the educational system of Angola and Mozambique. In Angola, Portugal's policy provided for two educational systems, one for Africans and one for Europeans, mulattoes, and assimilados. Moreover, the European system was designated by Portugal as the official system. In Angola, a Portuguese colony, there were two categories of citizenship. One was either an assimilado or an indigena. The word assimilado comes from assimilate, and to obtain this position in Angola, an African had to speak fluent Portuguese, attend Portuguese schools, and be 18 years of age. In order to acquire this position, Africans were required to submit an application with a non-refundable fee. A Portuguese official visited the home of the applicant to determine if the applicant had a Portuguese or civilized way of life. Such things as the cutlery being used and the wearing of shoes were examined. Moreover, to acquire the assimilado position, one invariably was required to be Catholic. The indigenous category included those indigenous Africans who had never been to Portuguese schools and spoke Portuguese slightly or not at all. This included the vast majority of people in Angola. The indigenous held second-class citizenship and were required to carry identification cards wherever they went. Even on passenger trains, there were separate cars for the assimilados and the indigenous. A huge gulf existed between the assimilados and the indigenous of Angola. of Angola. In Angola, when a young boy was initiated into the Makunda, or manhood, it was considered an important ceremony. In these ceremonies, there were traditional dances, circumcision, and discussions of tribal heritage and folklore. An assimilado would be very angry if his or her son was initiated in these ceremonies because they were based on indigenous African heritage and were not part of Portuguese mind control. Responsibility for the Angolans was the official task of the Catholic missions. They were to prepare students for roles and peasants and artisans. The Portuguese educational system for mulattoes, assimilated Africans, and Europeans was maintained by Portugal and was a carbon copy of its own educational system. Once again, Africans, by virtue of training, were manufactured into Europeans, and exploitation of labor and natural resources was controlled by the Portuguese. Dutch policies in Azania, South Africa, apartheid. When the Dutch invaded Azania, or South Africa, it was to find a route to seek goods directly from Asia, as Spain and Portugal had done before. In spite of the conflicts with the Spanish and the Portuguese, the Dutch were successful in organizing the Dutch East Indies companies in 1602. The beginning of the European presence in South Africa took place in 1652 when the Dutch dropped anchor at Table Bay. The Dutch and their descendants were called Boers, which means farmer. As the frontier farmers, or trek Boers, moved eastward and wrestled control of the land, they began to believe that it was indeed theirs. Like the old wagon trains in American Western stories, the Boers moved similarly with large families and stole cattle and homes from Africans. These Dutch invaders from Holland were followers of John Calvin, the most famous 16th century Protestant leader since Martin Luther. Calvin, a Frenchman who studied theology and law in Paris, had a conversion and abandoned Catholicism. His influence in the field of systematic theology spread from Geneva, Switzerland, through the whole of Europe. With the invasion of the Dutch, John Calvin's theology began taking shape in the minds of whites in South Africa. Afrikaners, as the Dutch called themselves, believed they were the chosen people of the Old Testament, wandering in the wilderness of South Africa in search of the Promised Land. Even in established areas, the invaders developed attitudes that became a part, the invaders developed attitudes that became the apartheid philosophy. Apartheid is a word derived from apart or separate, and from the Dutch "heid," which means state or condition of. Therefore, apartheid means state or condition of remaining separate. Theoretically, apartheid means more than separation. As a policy, it also entails political and economic exploitation. The driving force behind the racist legislation that held the apartheid regimen together was Hendrik Verwoerd, an immigrant from the Netherlands. In the 1950s, as a Minister of Native Affairs in South Africa, he was responsible for the introduction of several bills with sanctioned segregation already being practiced. He was also responsible for the creation of Bantustans, or Bantu states, where Africans were forced to live. After 1948, successive governments passed a series of apartheid laws. These laws were instituted to control all aspects of South African life. The mindset that developed the apartheid regime was one that saw Africans as drawers of water and hewers of wood, and totally inferior to Europeans. These laws resulted in Africans beginning to believe they were inferior to the Dutch settlers. As in other parts of the world where the European mentality prevails, the apartheid policy was aimed at the continuation of white supremacy and the exploitation of the labor and natural resources of Africa. Textbooks written by the Dutch and used in South African schools stated that Europeans were in South Africa before Africans. What? That's a lie. Textbook written by the Dutch and used in South African schools stated that Europeans were in South Africa before Africans. This is similar to the usual lie that Europeans tell of having discovered territories that were inhabited by indigenous people long before their arrival. One of the beliefs of John Calvin was that man, i.e. white man, could be saved since it was impossible for the elect of God, the elect being whites, to fall away from grace. Europeans, operating from a perspective of self-centeredness, absolute authority, and racial superiority, viewed Africans as stupid, lazy, and dishonest. Consequently, the Dutch had no problem interpreting predestination along these lines, and in time, Calvinism gave doctrinal sanction to the apartheid attitudes which had developed along extra theological origins. Again, religion is at the root of the destruction of the African mind. Whether the belief system is Calvinism, Catholicism, or Protestantism, or otherwise, the results are always the same. Edwin Smith and the Golden Stool. Edwin Smith. Edwin William Smith, a European, was born the son of missionaries in northern Azania, South Africa, on September 7, 1876. His father left South Africa with him after spending 10 years there and later returned to London. Smith, like Cecil Rhodes and David Livingstone and other would-be explorers of the time, read extensively about African exploration. During his reading, Smith developed a longing to return to the place of his birth. The opportunity presented itself when in 1895 a position as a Bible translator became available in Central Africa. He also spent time with a mission in Lesotho and in Zambia. Smith had a keen interest in the religious belief of African people and published widely on the subject. Like any missionary, his intent was to reach the mind of Africans and bring them into the light of Christianity. Smith was shrewd and methodical in his operations of the African mind. Traditional beliefs were incorporated into the Christian faith. They were used only as stepping stones by Smith to infuse the African mind with the gospel. As an example, Smith would use the names of African gods in his preaching and then proceed to preach the so-called gospel of Jesus Christ. While living in Zambia, Smith built schools and translated the Bible into ILA. Knowing that researchers needed to understand the people, he collaborated with A.M. Dale on anthropological studies of the Isla people. His work led other anthropologists to direct their attention to Africa. As a visionary, Smith realized that Africans were not going to remain under the total domination of Europeans. He also understood that if Africans identified Christianity with Western imperialism, it would be rejected when Africa became independent. Therefore, he believed that in mixing and meshing African language, dance, drama, music, etc. with Christianity, it would gain a firmer hold on the African mind. The integrated and interrelated studies of Smith suggest a deep sense of understanding of the African concept of oneness. He also used cross-cultural references to make points. As a missionary, linguist, anthropologist, and student of the African mentality, Smith spent a year on the African American campus of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. The Golden Stool. In the late 19th and earlier centuries, as Europeans dominated Africans through colonization, a book was published entitled The Golden Stool. It was written by Edwin W. Smith and published by Holborn Publishing House in 1926. The book outlines the plans, intentions, and attitudes of European missionaries toward their African subjects. In the preface, The Golden Stool, Smith expresses tremendous admiration for the explorer and missionary David Livingstone. Livingstone, quoted by Edwin Smith in the preface of the book, in a lecture at Cambridge University, directs his audience to Africa. In the following statement, Livingstone says, "I know that in a few years I shall be cut off in the country which is now open. Do not let it be shut again. I go back to Africa to try to make an open path for commerce and Christianity. Do carry out the work which I have begun. I leave it with you." Smith makes it clear, and mistakes are often made by Europeans due to their ignorance of the African mind. When Europeans took possession of African territories, plans had to be put into place to govern the Africans. According to Smith, the plans should be carried out in the following manner. First, destroy the institutions, traditions, and habits of the people, and then superimpose upon the ruins whatever the governing power considers to be a better administrative system. The other method, while checking the worst abuses, tries to graft a higher civilization on the soundly rooted native stock, bringing out the best of what is in the native tradition and molding it into a form consonant with modern ideas and higher standards, and yet all the time enlisting on our side the real force of the spirit of people. Europeans during slavery as well as colonialism used the tactic of repression against Africans. Smith, on page 173 of The Golden Stool, said this policy was impractical since the African refused to be repressed. The result, he said, would be wars of extermination, or the Europeans would suffer by the decay of the natives. Smith continues with his analysis of African people when he states, "Since a civilization is the expression of the mind of a people, the capacity to acquire an alien form is dependent upon the preliminary acquisition of certain definite mental characteristics. In other words, the African must be endowed with a European mind if he is to be civilized in a European manner." Though a missionary and an agent of the British government, Smith believed in learning all that could be learned about the Africans and urged against the discarding of everything African. He did this because he felt Europe would have more longevity to benefit from Africa's wealth. Smith says of the African past, a complete wiping out of the past is psychologically impossible. The African mind is not a tabula rasa, a blank page, upon which we can write what we please. In the chapter entitled Christianity in Africa, Smith gives the following instructions. The missionary must apply himself to a close, accurate, detailed, prolonged study of the people, and even when he knows them thoroughly, should abstain from trying to put down customs by the weight of his authority. He writes further about how European Christian religion is a mixture of old pagan cults drawn from many sources. Easter is mentioned as being a celebration of the death and resurrection of a pagan god at the spring equinox. Christmas is a festival mingled with Celtic and Teutonic mythology. Ultimately, to ask Africans to drop their past is to ask Africans what Europeans do not ask of themselves. Smith uses the term sublimation to describe the process for establishing indigenous African Christianity. He states, as used by psychologists, this sublimation describes the process of utilizing the primary instinctive tendencies of mankind as a great fund of energy available for the higher ends of life. The superposition of man's higher moral and intellectual capacity upon a basis of animal instincts. Smith's intent was to redirect African customs and beliefs toward Christian ends. He believed that all the best in the past of the Africans should be enlisted in the service of Jesus Christ. A clear example of sublimation might well be the initiation ceremonies of African boys and girls at puberty. The initiations are regarded by Africans as important for entrance into tribal life. Missionaries did not approve of many of the features of the initiation. Smith, however, felt these ceremonies should be sublimated. He saw the extension of the Boy Scout movement into Africa as an example of the sublimation of the initiation ceremony, since Baden-Powell, founder of the Boy Scouts, admitted that he adopted many of the principles from the Zulus and other African societies in order to be successful in Christianizing Africans. These and other ancient customs should be sublimated or converted into, and not ignored or repressed, into something Christian. On education in Africa and as far as religion in the schools is concerned, Smith believed that any education that is in accordance with African genius will make religion color every phase of life. Lastly, Europeans knew that even with the mixture of the African cultural components into the religion, they would still have the upper hand. If we make him a worthy citizen of the kingdom of God, he will also become an efficient and useful citizen of the British Commonwealth, fitted in the future to take his place beside his European peers and useful to them as well as to his fellow Africans. European missionaries and explorers traveled to Africa under the guise of civilizing the savages, but the major purpose was to rob Africa of her many resources. This could best be accomplished by the use of the King James Version of the Bible. The masquerade was so well orchestrated that some well-known missionaries and explorers have their names posted today on African American institutions. Two examples are Livingstone College and Wilberforce University. The Berlin Conference was the official European organ outlining rules and regulations for the rape of Africa. Opening in the name of Almighty God, the nations of Europe and the United States proceeded to appropriate African territories. Africans were so insignificant to Europeans that no African nations were represented at the conference. Cecil Rhodes represented Britain and Zimbabwe, and though not religious himself, understood the impact of European Christianity on the African mind. Rhodes was initiated into Masonry while at Oxford University, though later he was very critical of the Masonic order. He outlined his own ambition, which was to unite the whole Anglo-Saxon race to rule the world. Strategically, he employed at least 2 missionaries in his mob to influence the king at the Matabele. The theft of Zimbabwe meant a tremendous amount of wealth for the British crown. African people should rethink their admiration for the Rhodes Scholarship after understanding its history. Edwin Smith, author of The Golden Stool, knew that new minds had to be installed in the heads of Africans if Europeans were going to be successful in their endeavors to gain Africa's wealth. He constructed a well-planned scheme of controlling Africans through the use of African traditions and European Christianity. It was understood by Smith that initially all instructions and habits of the indigenous people had to be destroyed. Secondly, another administrative system was formed for the purpose of governing African nations. Based upon the writings of Edwin Smith, he, as did others of his time, believed British culture to be superior to African culture. Sublimination was used to redirect African customs toward Christian ends. Smith always agreed to utilize the best in African culture for the benefit of Europe. In terms of education, he felt religion should color every phase of life, although each of the colonizing nations had their own policies of governance. All policies included church and schools as major tools in the acquisition for control of the minds of Africans and the theft of their resources. That's the end of chapter 5. Again, I started this live off reading an article by a brother named, did it go away? His last name was Christoph, and I shared it on my page, and it was just talking about the power of words, how everything we use is to enslave us. Work week, weekend, you're weakened by the weekend. You earn wages, but your body goes in an urn when you die if you get cremated. You wear a suit and tie and uniforms because, it was just a whole lot that he pointed out. So, we in this system, we're slaves to the system, and I have no words of advice. I'm just understanding all of these things and just trying to move more consciously in my flow and my purpose, because I also understand that we are spiritual beings, having human experiences, and I don't want this to control me like it's designed to do. So, thank y'all for tuning in. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. I'll be checking in later. Peace.